What are the things that inspire you when nothing seems to be working?
It's quite easy, really. It's the records that really turn me on in the early stages of things. They can still have a real profound effect on me listening to them.
What if I told you that Jimmy Page, the guitar wizard who gave us Stairway to Heaven and Kashmir,
Stairway was to have a piece of music, a composition,
learned his most legendary techniques from artists you'd never expect? We're talking about secret slide guitar revelations stolen from watching the Rolling Stones, heated studio sessions copying Elvis's Guitarist, and a $1,000 guitar deal that literally created the sound of heavy metal. From rockabilly rebels to blues masters, Page's influences sparked industry rivalries.
There was a reputation, and there was a reason why there was a reputation of why we were so good, and this sort of connection on stage.
Controversial copying accusations and backstage drama that nearly destroyed friendships. There's the moment he discovered the tuning secret that unlocked his mystical sound by spying on Brian Jones.
And Brian Jones was going to make a soundtrack to a film that Anita Pallenberg was in.
The heated competition with Jeff Beck over who could master obscure rockabilly solos, and the shocking admission about which guitarist he considers the ultimate influence, a choice that will completely rewrite rock history. But here's what makes this story explosive. Page didn't just admire these artists, he systematically studied them, stole their techniques, and transformed them into something entirely new. Some called it genius, others called it theft. The truth is more complex and controversial than anyone imagined. Today we're counting down Jimmy Page's 6 biggest influences, revealing the secret techniques, stolen licks, and industry scandals behind Led Zeppelin's legendary sound. Trust me, number 1 will blow your mind. 6. Scotty Moore. Here's a story that will shatter everything you thought you knew about heavy metal's origins. Before Jimmy Page was terrorizing audiences with thunderous riffs, he was a teenager obsessed with a quiet country guitarist from Tennessee who played behind the king of rock and roll. Scotty Moore wasn't just Elvis's sideman. He was the blueprint for every rock guitarist who followed. The revelation came when Page first heard "Baby, Let's Play House." That driving guitar line, that percussive attack, that revolutionary blend of country picking and urban attitude, it hit the future Led Zeppelin mastermind like lightning. Industry insiders claim that Page spent countless hours dissecting Moore's technique.
Gone to heaven, and I mean this for sure. It was a really emotional moment. He's singing it beautifully with so much emotion.
Trying to crack the code of how someone could make a guitar sound so aggressive yet so melodic. But here's where the controversy begins. Music historians argue that Page's obsession with Moore created his first major artistic conflict. Early session producers allegedly complained that the young guitarist was too influenced by American rockabilly, pushing him toward more traditional British styles. The tension nearly cost Page several high-profile recording opportunities. The influence ran so deep that decades later, during Led Zeppelin's legendary performances of "Whole Lotta Love," Page would deliberately recreate Moore's exact guitar parts from that original Elvis recording. Critics called it homage, skeptics called it musical plagiarism. The truth reveals something more complex, a master craftsman acknowledging the foundation upon which his empire was built. Moore's percussive style and innovative use of echo became essential elements in Page's sonic arsenal, proving that rock's heaviest sound actually began in country music's backrooms. 5. Gene Vincent. This is the story of rock's most dangerous influence, a leather-jacketed wild man whose 3-minute songs created a decades-long rivalry between two future legends. Gene Vincent and his Blue Caps weren't just making music in the 1950s, they were crafting a blueprint for rebellion that would eventually birth both Led Zeppelin and the Yardbirds. The drama started when teenage Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck discovered Vincent's Bebop-a-Lula around the same time. Both guitarists became completely obsessed, but their shared fascination turned into heated competition. According to industry veterans, Page and Beck would challenge each other relentlessly, demanding to hear each other's versions of Vincent's guitar solos. the question became a test of skill. What's your version of My Babe? Vincent's guitarist Cliff Gallup was delivering a harder, more aggressive sound than anyone had heard before. His frantic picking style and raw energy spoke directly to Page's developing musical vision. Music historians suggest that Vincent's influence was so profound, it actually shaped Page's entire approach to stage presence.
And try and work out these solos note for note, and that's it. Everyone learnt that way as far as I can.
The theatrical intensity, the dangerous unpredictability, the sense that anything could happen. The competitive element between Page and Beck over Vincent's material allegedly created lifelong tension. Studio engineers from the 1960s recall sessions where both guitarists would reference Vincent tracks, each trying to prove they understood the source material better. When they later worked together in the Yardbirds, this underlying rivalry over their shared influence created some of their most explosive performances. Vincent had given them the template for rock guitar as a weapon, and both men spent their careers proving who wielded it better. 4. Muddy Waters. The story of how Muddy Waters transformed Jimmy Page reads like a religious conversion, complete with revelation, obsession, and the birth of a musical revolution. When the young British guitarist first encountered Waters' electrified Chicago blues, it wasn't just influence. It was complete sonic indoctrination that would reshape rock music forever.
Yeah, okay.
What'd you say to that?
Well, I think that's really good, personally.
Okay.
I'm going to grade that as a 10.
Waters represented everything Page had been searching for without knowing it existed. The raw power, the hypnotic repetition, the way a single riff could control an entire room's energy. Page later confessed that Waters' approach to riff-based music became his fundamental concept for Led Zeppelin. Every crushing riff that would later define heavy metal traced back to those Chess Records sessions in Chicago. But the influence came with controversy. Music critics have spent decades arguing that Page's admiration crossed into outright theft. Songs like You Shook Me sparked heated debates about artistic borrowing versus plagiarism. Industry insiders claim that Waters himself was aware of these accusations but remained philosophical about young musicians learning from his work. The transformation was complete when Page realized that Waters hadn't just created songs. He'd invented a language. The vocabulary of modern rock guitar, the grammar of heavy music, the entire conversation between power and emotion. Page learned that language fluently, then taught it to the world. 3. Elmore James. This is the moment everything changed for Jimmy Page. The exact instant when a struggling young guitarist cracked the code that would later create some of rock's most haunting and powerful sounds. Elmore James wasn't just an influence. He was the key that unlocked an entire universe of musical possibilities that Page had been desperately trying to access. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. Page had been struggling for months, maybe years, trying to master James's slide guitar technique. Every attempt failed miserably. The frustration was eating him alive as he listened to masterpieces like Dust My Broom and The Sky Is Crying, knowing there was some secret he couldn't grasp. Then came the revelation that changed rock history. Page was watching Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones perform at the Ealing Jazz Club when suddenly everything clicked. Jones was playing bottleneck guitar, and at that moment, Page realized the secret wasn't in the technique. It was in the tuning. James had been using open tunings all along. The discovery was explosive. Page later described it as his breakthrough moment, when that whole world opened itself up. Suddenly, he wasn't just copying James note for note, he was understanding the entire philosophy behind slide guitar. The mystical, otherworldly sounds that would later define songs like In My Time of Dying and Kashmir, all traced back to this single moment of enlightenment. Studio engineers recall Page's obsession becoming almost manic after this discovery. He would spend entire sessions exploring different open tunings, chasing the ghost of Elmore James through every possible combination of strings and frets, transforming ancient blues techniques into modern musical sorcery. 2. Les Paul. Here's the revelation that demolishes everything you thought you knew about guitar heroes. While every rock fan argues about Hendrix versus Clapton, Jimmy Page quietly made the most shocking confession in guitar history.
More familiar with from my Les Paul Custom. They're more sensitive and, boy, they've held up for all those.
When asked about his ultimate influence, he didn't name a blues legend or rock pioneer. He named the inventor himself, calling Les Paul simply the One. This wasn't just about musical inspiration. Les Paul didn't just play guitar. He reinvented the entire concept of what an electric guitar could be. His development of the solid-body electric guitar literally created the tool that would build rock and roll. Without Paul's innovations, there would be no power chords, no feedback, no wall of sound that defined Led Zeppelin. But the influence ran deeper than equipment. Paul was also a revolutionary recording artist who pioneered multi-tracking, overdubbing, and studio techniques that Page would later use to create Zeppelin's massive sound. The layered guitars on Stairway to Heaven, the intricate arrangements that made 4 musicians sound like an orchestra, all traced back to Paul's studio innovations from the 1940s and 1950s. Industry veterans suggest that Page's reverence for Paul bordered on obsession. Unlike his other influences, this wasn't about copying licks or stealing techniques. It was about understanding the fundamental science of electric sound. Paul had solved problems that Page didn't even know existed, creating solutions that would become essential to rock music. The cruel irony is that Les Paul remains relatively unknown compared to the guitar heroes who used his inventions. Page understood the injustice, calling Paul a genius whose contributions to music were criminally underappreciated. The student was honoring the master who built the very foundation of electric music. 1. Joe Walsh. This is the most insane revelation in rock history. Jimmy Page's greatest influence wasn't a blues legend or guitar pioneer. It was a chance encounter with Joe Walsh that literally created the sound of heavy metal. We're not talking about musical inspiration here. We're talking about the exact moment when one guitar changed the trajectory of rock music forever. Picture this scene: Led Zeppelin is touring America, still using Page's trusty Telecaster from his Yardbirds days. Walsh then, with the James Gang, approaches Page backstage at the Fillmore East with a proposition that would reshape music history. He's carrying a 1959 Sunburst Gibson Les Paul, insisting that Page absolutely must have this guitar. Page initially resisted, claiming he didn't need it because he already owned a Les Paul Custom.
And Joe Walsh comes along with his guitar and says, "You've got to buy this guitar." And I said, "But I've got a Les Paul Custom," which means it had 3 pickups on it.
But Walsh was relentless, practically forcing the guitar into Page's hands. The transaction seemed insignificant, $1,200 for a used guitar that wasn't even particularly rare at the time. Then came the moment that changed everything. Page plugged in Les Paul and recorded "Whole Lotta Love" and "What Is and What Should Never Be." The sound was so revolutionary that Page immediately knew his Telecaster days were over. He later confessed that he built Led Zeppelin's second album entirely around the sonic texture of that specific guitar. So there you have it. From country pickers to guitar inventors, Jimmy Page's influences prove that rock's greatest innovations come from the most unexpected places. A $1,200 guitar deal literally created heavy metal. Which revelation shocked you most? Smash that like button, drop your wildest theories in the comments, and subscribe for more explosive guitar secrets.